The startling discovery that had rocked Harbinger Hill's peaceful existence stunned the little community. Selena Montrose, a delightful woman well known for her vivid personality and relentless commitment to her husband, Darius Montrose, was at the center of the storm. Successful and esteemed marine biologist Darius appeared to have the ideal life. But behind his perfect surface was a sinister, secret festering. One sunny spring morning, Darius's cousin Ayman Khalil was discovered dead in a shallow grave close to the edge of the large forest bordering the Montrose estate. This marked a radical turn in the couple's life. The 3-week absence of ambitious and charismatic entrepreneur Ayman had been the buzz of the town. A group of cadaver dogs made the discovery while on a regular training session nearby. Trained to smell decaying bodies, the dogs guided their owners directly to the location where Ayman's body lay buried under a meager layer of dirt and vegetation. Friends, sorry to interrupt, but please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. Let's continue. Police were summoned right away to the scene. Charged with the case, seasoned investigator Detective Marlo, known for her sharp intuition and methodical approach, took leadership. The first look at the scene pointed to foul play, and soon the forensic team verified Ayman had been killed. Blunt force trauma to the head was the cause of death. Defensive wounds suggested a vigorous fight. Detective Marlo dug more into the inquiry and found a web of lies, treachery, and forbidden passion. Ayman Khalil had not been the model family man everyone thought he to be. Ayman had been engaged in an illegal affair with none other than Selena Montrose. It became abundantly clear from painstaking interviews and digital evidence analysis. Selena had been living 2 lives, yet her outward behavior suggested that of a loving and committed wife. Detective Marlo found on Ayman's phone a string of text messages, covert emails, and damning pictures that begged little question about the nature of their relationship. The affair had started some months earlier, and the intensity of their covert meetings had grown to be intolerable and impossible to hide. The finding of the affair gave the murder a vital incentive. Still, the elements of the puzzle did not fit quite together. Selena behaved rather strangely during the inquiry. She appeared obliging, but her attitude was tinged with nervousness. Maintaining that their affair had ended weeks before Ayman vanished, she denied any participation in his death. To complicate things even more, Darius Montrose offered an enigmatic presence. Being Selena's husband and Ayman's cousin, his feelings were a convoluted mix of loss, resentment, and uncertainty. Darius presented himself as a victim of events beyond his control and claimed to have known of the affair. But Detective Marlo's gut feeling informed her Darius had more than first appeared. Marlo's team used different forensic methods as the inquiry went on to find more hints. Ayman had been at the Montrose estate just before his death. DNA profiling verified. Traces of Ayman's blood were found by bloodstain pattern analysis in the garage, suggesting that he had been attacked there prior to being driven to the burial site. Under closer inspection, Selena's alibi for the evening Ayman vanished, started to fall apart. Detective Marlo's receiving of an anonymous tip marked the turning point in the inquiry. Claiming to have seen Selena and Ayman together on the evening he disappeared, a mystery caller said. The tip brought Marlo to a remote cabin in the forest, one Ayman had leased under a fictitious name. Evidence of their affair permeated the cabin, but more shockingly, it included a blood-stained hammer that matched Ayman's body's wounds. Selena Montrose was arrested and charged with murder of Ayman Khalil based on growing proof. The case that had first seemed unambiguous now collapsed into a jumble of half-truths, secrets, and lies. Attracting interest from all around, Selena's trial was scheduled as the most spectacular event in Harbinger Hill's history. Detective Marlo knew that the truth was far from simple, and that the last chapter of this sinister story had yet to be written, as the society prepared for the disclosures that would expose. While Selena Montrose awaited trial, the inquiry kept removing layers of dishonesty to reveal the complexity of relationships entwined and resulting in Ayman Khalil's terrible death. Detective Marlo knew the case was far from simple, even as she pursued the truth relentlessly. The shrewd and strong Judith Sloan, Selena's defense lawyer, developed her approach on questioning the story of the prosecution. Driven to an affair by her husband's neglect and Ayman's seductive appeal, she portrayed Selena as a woman imprisoned in a loveless marriage. Sloan claims Selena was caught in a web of lies spun by the men in her life, victim of circumstances. Though at first he claimed to be ignorant, Darius Montrose soon came under close examination. He was a marine biologist. Thus, he spent a lot of time far from home, in a suitable habitat for the affair to flourish. Still, his absence did not clear him of all the suspicion. As Marlo's team found contradictions in his remarks, his cool head started to fallish. When Detective Marlo decided to look into Darius's past, the inquiry veered dramatically. Interviews with friends and colleagues revealed a man less than perfect, not as modest as he seemed. Darius had a history of controlling behavior, covered by his professional success and polite demeanor. Many colleagues alluded to a tense relationship between him and Ayman, resulting from a long-standing rivalry going back to their childhood. Marlo's gut feeling sensed more to Darius's involvement. The break came when digital forensics found encrypted emails between Darius and an unidentified correspondent talking about dealing with the problem. The chronology of these exchanges matched the period just before Ayman vanished. Ayman's financial records produced the most damning proof. Investigating unusual activity, Marlo's staff found Ayman had been blackmailing Darius. Ayman had threatened to reveal Darius's darkest secrets, so driving him to either comply with orders or risk disaster. The affair with Selena was only a weapon in Ayman's toolkit, meant to throw Darius even more off balance. Selena's defense had to change as these disclosures surfaced. Selena insisted that her relationship with Ayman was based on real affection, even if it was morally wrong, and claimed she was ignorant of the blackmail. Sensing a chance, Judith Sloan changed her approach to specifically name Darius. Driven to desperation by Ayman's threats, she said Darius had planned the murder and framed Selena to eliminate both issues at once. The trial turned into a psychological warfare front ground. Under the steely and relentless Jacob Thatcher, the prosecution concentrated on the physical evidence tying Selena to the crime. Her guilt was suggested by the blood-stained hammer, DNA traces, and damning notes. But in Sloan, Thatcher had a tough opponent, whose story of a manipulative and controlling Darius started to change public perspective. Called to testify about the tense relationships and covert actions defining the Montrose and Khalil households, witnesses were friends and neighbors related stories of Darius's controlling impulses and Ayman's reckless drive. The trial created a striking picture of a dysfunctional family in which loyalty and treachery danced a dangerous tango. Though sure of the proof against Selena, Detective Marlo could not get rid of the impression that the whole truth stayed elusive. Her breakthrough came from an unanticipated source, an old diary Selena had left behind and found by accident on a Montrose estate search. The diary notes exposed a tormented woman, caught between her love for Ayman and her anxiety of Darius. One especially noteworthy entry was Selena's account of a conflict with Darius, whereby he had threatened to end it all should she fail to meet his expectations. This insight introduced still another level of difficulty. Together with Amon's pressure, Selena's anxiety of Darius painted her not only as a suspect, but also as a possible victim. Marlo came to see Selena might have been forced into covering up, or worse, had acted out of pure desperation to get away from an unworkable situation. The courtroom turned into a high-drama theater as the trial went on. With both the defense and the prosecution making strong cases, Selena's future teeter-balanced. Now, under scrutiny, Darius battled his own set of legal challenges as fresh proof of his participation surfaced. Ultimately, separating the strands of love, dishonesty, and desperation that had resulted in Amon's murder would determine the jury's verdict. Detective Marlo knew the truth was never black and white. Justice would have to negotiate the muddy waters of human imperfection and ambition. As Selena Montrose's trial moved into its climax, the courtroom hummed with expectancy. Both the prosecution and the defense spun a story meant to influence the jury, and they were unrelenting. Still, among the legal fireworks, a deeper, more intimate drama unfolded, exposing the actual nature of the relationships that had brought about Amon Khalil's death. The prosecutor, Jacob Thatcher, carefully arranged the facts, emphasizing the physical evidence, the blood-stained hammer, DNA traces, and digital footprints linking Selena to the crime. Though messy, he maintained that the affair served only as the background for a cold, deliberate murder motivated by jealousy and fear of exposure. Thatcher said Selena chose to kill Amon after realizing he threatened to expose their affair and blackmail Darius. Selena's defense lawyer, Judith Sloan, answered with equal force. She depicted a woman driven into a dire situation by the men around her, caught in a web of manipulation and control. Sloan claimed that Darius's threats and Amon's coercion had pushed Selena to a breaking point whereby, although unfortunate, her actions made sense, considering the psychological pressure she was under. This story depends much on the diary entries, which show Selena as a victim of circumstance rather than a cold-blooded killer. When Darius Montrose came to the stand, the trial veered dramatically. His testimony was vital for the emotional weight it carried, as much as for its substance. Usually calm and clear-spoken, Darius seemed obviously disturbed. He battled to keep his cool under cross-examination as Sloan dug into his past actions and the claimed blackmail by Amon. The courtroom gasped as Darius acknowledged getting menacing notes from Amon. Driven by Amon's ambition to use his secrets for financial advantage, he admitted that his rivalry with his cousin had gotten out of hand. Darius's admission gave the defense's assertion that he had a motive to want Amon dead more credibility, so possibly linking him to the murder. Still, the most explosive disclosure came from an unlikely source, a defense-hired forensic accountant. Following painstakingly over Amon's financial records, the accountant discovered a large transaction made just days before his death. Tracked back to a shell company Darius owned, the payment indicated a payoff, maybe meant to quiet Amon. This fresh data questions Darius's innocence, implying he might have planned the murder and framed Selena. Observing the trial, Detective Marlo became enraged. Truth seemed more elusive than it had ever been. Every discovery complicated matters and made it more difficult to identify the actual genius behind the murder. Marlo's instincts led her to believe that although Selena and Darius were responsible in different ways, proving this in court proved an enormous difficulty. The last days of the trial were a whirl of feeling and great drama. Selena stood up, her testimony a mix of contrition and defiance. Admitting to the affair with Amon, she said it was a means of escape from her husband's repressive control. She related the evening Amon died, saying Darius had found the affair and threatened Amon as well as her. Selena claimed that the confrontation became violent and Amon died. From her perspective of events, she had assisted in the body's disposal out of life's fear. The jury debated what seemed to be an eternity. Their work was difficult given the complexity of the case, its interwoven motives and shifting responsibility. At last, a decision was rendered. Selena Montrose was found guilty of manslaughter, a charge that recognized her involvement in Eamon's death, but also took mitigating circumstances of coercion and fear into account. Darius Montrose was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice, among other things. Though circumstantial, the proof against him was strong enough to call for a separate trial. His collapse was as dramatic as the ascent of his career had been, a sobering reminder of how authority and control might corrupt even the most apparently moral people. Detective Marlo considered the case that had eaten months of her life as the courtroom drama came to an end. The trial had revealed the frailty of human relationships, the terrible results of dishonesty, and the terrible force of secrets. She came to see that justice was a mosaic of truths and half-truths, where the lines separating victim from offender sometimes blurred. It was not always clear-cut. The trial of Selena Montrose and the charges later leveled against Darius Montrose left Harbinger Hill in disarray. The scandal had ripped across the town's fabric, leaving a path of damaged faith and unresolved questions. The lives of people involved would never be the same as the dust started to settle. Sentenced 8 years for manslaughter, Selena Montrose was thrown into the demanding reality of incarceration. Once full of social events and community gatherings, her days now were a monotonous mix of habit and meditation. Selena used the time to consider her decisions, the affair, and the violent conclusion it had produced. Driven to find some sort of atonement among the turmoil, she took part in counseling sessions and educational courses. Selena's public view was mixed. While some saw her as a willing participant in the fatal affair, others considered her as a victim of Darius's control. From a desperate woman driven to the brink to a sly conspirator, media coverage of the trial had presented her in different light. Notwithstanding the different points of view, Selena's story turned into a warning about the complexity of human relationships and the results of betrayal. Following Selena's conviction, Darius Montrose's trial was likewise dramatic. His financial contacts with Eamon and his controlling actions presented a negative picture. According to the prosecution, Darius planned the murder to get rid of the blackmail threat and exact Selena punishment for her adultery. Conversely, his defense sought to present him as a man pushed to his limits by his wife's betrayal and cousin's extortion. Darius was guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice, the jury decided. 15 years in prison was his sentence, which fairly represented the gravity of his activities. The once celebrated marine biologist now lived behind bars, his career destroyed and his reputation dashed. Darius's decline from favor was a sobering reminder of how rapidly authority and control might be taken from us. Having seen the case through to its end, Detective Marlo experienced both gratification and residual anxiety. The inquiry had unearthed the sinister undercurrents of an apparently ideal family, and even if justice had been done, the human cost was indisputable. Marlo had been relentless in her quest of the truth, but she couldn't get rid of the impression that the whole narrative might never really be known. Harbinger Hill's community battled to move ahead following the trials. The scandal had revealed cracks and tensions that would not heal right away. Once close friends and neighbors found themselves split by the disclosures. Once pillars of the community, the Montrose and Khalil families were now monuments to the way ambition and dishonesty might ruin lives. Captured in the crossfire of their parents' behavior, Selena's children had their own difficulties. They carried great weight from the stigma of their father's incarceration and mother's conviction. Their grandparents looked after them and made every effort to create a consistent surroundings. Though young, the children were strong and started to reconstruct their lives given time and help. Detective Marlo suffered long effects from the case as well. One of the most difficult projects she had worked on, the one tested her abilities and intuition to the utmost. It had also been a sobering reminder of the subtleties of human nature and the extent people would go to keep secrets. Knowing that her work was far from done, but also realizing the need of balance in her life, Marlo took some time off to think and rejuvenate. The tale of Selena, Darius, and Eamon grew ingrained in the town as Harbinger Hill gradually returned to some degree of normalcy. It served as a reminder that under the surface of any society, there might be latent currents of ambition, desire, and betrayal. The Montrose and Khalil families left a warning story for next generations. Ultimately, the story of love, dishonesty, and murder in Harbinger Hill was evidence of the complexity of human relationships and the usually terrible results of our decisions. In this narrative, the real victims were those left to gather the fragments of broken lives. Justice, while served, came at an enormous cost. Forever altered, the community learnt to forward carrying with it the lessons of a tragedy that had touched each of them.